This week we're going to learn about the elements of art. So all of you got one of these packets on Friday, and you're going to grab that so we can go through it together and talk about the elements of art. So it's black and white, so you can color this if you'd like, just for fun. And you're going to open it up. Now, the elements of art, I like to think about it as like the rules of art or the language of art. So everything has its own language, like music. People can read music. That's music's language. We have an alphabet. That's our language. That's how we communicate words and feelings and thoughts and things like that. Art has to have a language too. And it's kind of a challenge because art is like a visual thing that we look at. So there's no words. It's just pictures, usually, or colors or forms and things like that. So how do we know what an artist is trying to say just through pictures? Well, we use the elements of art to help us understand those things. So there's 7 elements, 7 of it. Well, I think there's more, but 7 formal elements, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So open up your first page, and the interesting thing about these elements is they all kind of build on each other. So I like to think about them as like Legos, like building blocks. You can't really have, all of them unless you have this first one down here. So the very first Lego to our elements of art is line. Line, we can read this together. A line is a path a moving point makes on a surface. It's the simplest element. Line can be seen in cave paintings as well as the work of the youngest artists. To put it simply, a line is a continuous, and I circled that word because we're going to talk about what that means, a continuous mark as one made by a pencil, pen, or brush across a surface. So what does continuous mean? It sounds like the word to continue, and it means to keep going. So I like to think about lines like a dot that went for a walk. So if you make a dot and then you keep going, it becomes a continuous mark, and it's a line. So you started with a dot and it becomes a line. Now, lines can be all sorts of ways, right? They're not just one type of line. There's many. There's millions. There's like so many we can't even name them all. Lines can vary in length, width, and direction. So length, that means how long they are. Width would be how wide they are. So let's see, I make a really wide, kind of a fat line here. That line would be wider than the rest. And then the direction of your line, is it going at a slant, diagonally? Is it going horizontally from right to left? Or is it going up and down vertically? Or is it going all crazy, right? So lines can be totally different. I think this is fascinating. Lines can actually show emotion or feeling. So it's kind of a funny thing to think about, a line communicating a feeling. But if I have a line, let me erase my board. If I have a line that looks like this, is that very exciting? Not really. It's kind of a boring line. So if I were trying to show something, kind of boring in my art, like I would probably draw that type of line. If I was trying to show like something so exciting and crazy, like fireworks, my lines could be like that, right? And that communicates excitement or some sort of emotion like that. So lines are really important because the way you draw your lines tells us how you're feeling or tells us what you're trying to say. So that's one piece of our art language. So you're going to finish that page there. The next page, you're going to turn it over. We're going to talk about shape. Now, you can't have shape without line. So a shape is made when a line encloses an area. So what does that mean? Let's talk about that. A shape is made when a line encloses an area. So when we draw a line, whoops, my eraser got stuck to me. Okay, when we draw a line, it doesn't make a shape, right? That's just a line. If I'm drawing a line that goes like this, and it encloses, meaning it makes a shape, that's a circle. So our line has now made a shape. That's what that means. So you can have lines that make all kinds of shapes when they enclose, right? So anything that can close itself is a shape. Shapes are flat and two-dimensional. So what does two-dimensional mean? You may have heard of like 3D or 2D or whatever, but two-dimensional means 2D. And that basically just means something that's flat. It only has 2 dimensions. Okay, so these are some examples right here. There are 2 main categories of shapes. We have shapes that are geometric and shapes that are organic. Those are another 2 big words to remember. So what do you think geometric shapes are? Have you ever heard of geometry, like math? Yeah, so geometric shapes are shapes that like we know pretty well, like squares, triangles, circles, things like that. They're geometric. We use them in math. We see them all the time. Organic shapes, organic, you may have heard that word, right? Like on your groceries at home, like organic milk or whatever it is that you buy. We're not talking about that kind of organic here. This is different. This means like shapes that just occur naturally. So if you look at the shapes that I just made here, which shape do you think would be the organic one? It's not geometric. I'll help you. It is this one. So this, and this, those are all geometric shapes, but if you have a shape that's just a little funky looking, that's an organic shape. Okay, so geometric shapes are characterized by simple rectilinear or curvilinear lines, meaning curvy or straight, that's all that means. They are shapes that generally have their own name, such as square, circle, or oval. So you're going to draw a few more here. And then organic shapes are characterized by being more free-flowing, natural shapes. So they kind of take on their own form. Organic shapes don't have names. They're very blob-like, all right? So like here, those aren't shapes that we can name. They're just organic shapes, but we see that they are flat and that a line can go all the way around them. They are a shape. All right, next page, we're going to talk about form. Now, you can't have form without shape and line. So again, we're building our blocks up, up, up. Form refers to shapes that have 3 dimensions. So remember, we just talked about shapes, and shapes have how many dimensions? 2. So forms have 3, so they've leveled up a little bit. That's kind of what I like to think of it as. Now, forms have 3 dimensions. Those 3 dimensions are height, width, and depth. They can be viewed from multiple angles. So a form is something that we could imagine ourselves walking around. So if you have a piece of art that you are working on, and you want to draw, let's say, a cube. I'm first going to draw a square. Now this is just a shape. It's flat. If I were trying to imagine myself in this piece of art, I could not walk around this. It's just like super flat, boring, kind of just, it's there, but I can't really do anything with it. But if I want to create more space in my picture, I can turn this shape into a form. And how I do that is I make it 3-dimensional 3D, and I add the element of depth. So it already had height, it already had width. I created depth by making it go back in space. So now it's 3D. I could imagine myself in this whiteboard walking around this cube. That's what a form is. So you're going to turn these shapes into forms. Now, there's a vanishing point here. A vanishing point is basically just a point that we can use in our head. It vanishes, meaning it's not actually there. It's a point we imagine. And that point helps us to create a form. So I'm going to show you a really easy way to do that. If you have a vanishing point up here on your horizon, and let's say you want to draw a cube, what you're going to do is imagine that all of your lines are aiming to that vanishing point. So I like to do this with a pencil really, really lightly so I can erase it, because these are like temporary lines that you can go over after. So you're going to bring all of your corners up to this line. Now, it looks like this square is just like coming straight at us, right? Like it's shooting off this whiteboard. All we did was add 3 little lines. So it really helps to create your form. And then what you can do is you can leave it like this, or if you want to really create a 3D form, you can take your pencil and create 2 parallel lines, one parallel line to the top and one parallel line to the side. And then you're going to erase your lines that reach towards your vanishing point. And now you have a cube that is the correct angle because you've aimed it at this vanishing point. So that's a really easy way to make your 3D forms. So that's what you're going to do there on that page. All right, turn the page. We're going to talk about space. And again, we're just building our elements up. So you can't have space unless you have form and all the things that came before it. So once you create your forms in your art, you have space. You have space in your art. So the element of space is used to create the illusion of depth. What does illusion mean? That is like a big, big word, illusion. So illusion means like it's sort of there, like we can sense it, we can sort of imagine it, but it's not really there. So I'll show you on an example. Actually, we'll keep reading first and then I'll show you at the very end. So artists use several techniques to create the illusion of depth, and there's some examples here for you to practice. So one of the things you can do is overlap. You can overlap your shapes. So if you have a shape that's in the very front, that one is obviously very close to us. And then if your shapes are farther back or smaller, then they're behind. So that helps us understand like there's things in that art that come before and after and beyond, and they go way back, right? So that helps us create depth and space. Shading. If you make something darker, it's going to feel like it's in the shade. If you make it lighter, it's going to feel like it's brighter and it's popping out more, and it's more in the front. Placement. Objects that are farther away are placed closer to the horizon line. So what does that mean? That's kind of a confusing one. I'll show you. So a horizon line is basically where the sky meets the earth. So let's pretend I'm drawing, I don't know, a landscape here. Here's my sky with my clouds, beautiful masterpiece here. Ta-da! And then I've got some grass down here. Okay. So if I'm drawing some cows in a field, if I have a cow all the way over here, I don't really know how to draw a cow, but that's good enough. All right. My cow back here, he looks like he's kind of far away. I could draw a cow face right here. That looks like a pig. Maybe that's a pig. There we go. It's a farm. So now which animal is closer to us? This one, because it's bigger. So that gives us the information we need to read this as close, far, in between. That helps us that helps our brain just like make sense of what's happening in this picture. So the placement of where we put things is important. It helps us understand that. Now the size of things, kind of similar, right? So the size, that pig that's in the front, he's bigger, so we know he's in front. That's generally the rule of thumb there. Value and focus. So that's another thing that helps us. Objects that are far away appear lighter in color and less clear than objects that are close. So if you are drawing some mountains in the background, you would want to draw these mountains really light, maybe like a light blue or a light gray, and maybe not so detailed, right? You could add a lot of detail here to this pig. You could give him little freckles, maybe a smile, some hairs, whatever. Lots of detail here because he's really close and he's in focus. Like we can see him right there. But if we're looking way back here, that's way out of focus. Like it's not very important. It's just kind of there to create the scene. But we want our main focus on the pig. So you can do that. You can guide your viewer's eyes to look where you want them to go. So if you add more detail, you put your objects closer up, that's going to help your viewer, the person who's looking at your art, to understand, oh, like this is what I'm supposed to be looking at first. And that's just not as important. It's just kind of back there. So that helps. And we've got perspective. So depth can be created through the use of one vanishing point, which is kind of what we just did on that last page. So you can use the same element there to create more space in your art. Turn the page. Now we're going to talk about texture. So there's two types of texture. There's actual texture and implied texture. So there's two types. What do you think those mean? Actual, the word actual means like real, like it's actually there, right? So my mug here, whoa, it's full. I forgot that I filled that up. My mug here, it's actually here. And the actual texture of this mug is bumpy and smooth, right? So it has little ridges, but it's smooth because it's ceramic. So that's the actual texture. I can feel it with my fingers. It's real, it's there. Implied texture, it's an illusion. So remember we talked about that, like it's not really there, but our brain sees it that way and we believe that it's there. So illusion, you can create an illusion of texture in your drawing. So let's look at my pig here again, who is just evolving as I keep drawing on him. A texture that he may have is hair. Like he could be fuzzy, right? Might have some little hairs coming off the side of his face. I don't know. Now that texture there is implied because if I were to bring my finger over this, I can't actually feel his fur, but I can imagine that it's there by looking. That's what that means. The next page, we're going to talk about value. So value refers to the lightness and the darkness of a color. So you're going to practice that here on this page. Value in black and white can be created by making marks of any kind closer together or farther apart. So I'll kind of show you an example of that. Value usually just means lightest to darkest. That's our value scale. It goes from light to dark. You can create value so many different ways. Like if you're creating a scene with grass, you can put your light green light green grass up front, and then you could make your grass darker and smaller as you go back. So those kinds of things help us understand what's going on and where the art is happening, what space is around us. And then you can also create value by almost like by making patterns. So imagine this is my value scale here, and I want to do shapes in it. So my value can go from light to dark by adding, let me show you this. Here at this side, we would make a bunch of shapes, a bunch of circles, all like as close together as we can. And then as we go lighter on our value scale, we would space them out. So it doesn't really go from light to dark, but it goes from like more space to less space. So that's another way to think about it, okay? And then at the bottom, we talk about tints and shades. Tints are things that you create by adding white to a color, and then shades are a thing that you create by adding black to a color, so it makes it darker. And then our final page, we talk about color theory. There's like millions of things that we could talk about in terms of color, and we will get there. We'll talk about color every time we do art, just because it's my favorite thing and it's really important, as well as all the other elements. But color theory is basically just a fancy way of saying color rules and guidelines. So it helps us, again, with our art language to understand what the artist is trying to communicate through their piece. So right here you've got a color wheel, which you've probably seen, and it has the first letter of each color there to help you understand what's going on. And then we've got cool colors and warm colors. Primary colors are the three colors from which all colors are created. So red, yellow, and blue are three primary colors, and you can make any color in the world from those colors. So that's why they're called primary, because they're first. They're like the first thing you need to make anything else after that. And then down here we have complementary colors. Okay, so it tells you what those are, and you're going to find them on your color wheel. Analogous colors are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So they're like friends, they're neighbors. Value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. So it goes from light to dark, similar to our other scales. So you are going to complete that page, and then if you flip to the very back, there is space for you to create a picture using every single element. So I want you to think about all the 7 elements and see if you can incorporate them into one piece of work right here. All right? Have fun. We will talk a ton about this, a ton more this year, but that's just an introduction. And I hope you guys have fun with your packet, and I will see you next week. Bye!